The Amazon rainforest stretches across much of northern South America, a continuous system of rivers, floodplains, and forest canopy that resists easy measurement. In southeastern Peru, where the lowland jungle meets the foothills of the Andes, the forest becomes dense and layered. The ground is rarely visible from above. Moisture lingers in the air. Sound travels unevenly, absorbed by vegetation or redirected by the terrain. Movement through this environment is slow and disorienting for those unfamiliar with it. Trails disappear quickly. Landmarks shift with light and weather. Distances that appear manageable on a map expand once entered on foot. This region supports thousands of plant species, many of them visually similar to an untrained observer. Vines, palms, and broadleaf trees compete for light, forming a living barrier that changes from one hour to the next. Rivers and streams define travel routes for local communities, but away from water the forest offers few natural guides. Survival here depends on preparation, experience, and restraint. Without those, the forest becomes indifferent rather than hostile. It does not pursue. It simply continues. In early 2019, David and Crystal entered this environment as visitors. They were not scientists or professional survivalists. Public reporting identifies them as travelers with an interest in nature and outdoor exploration. They had come to the Amazon region as part of a longer journey through South America, drawn by the appeal of remote landscapes and undeveloped wilderness. Like many travelers before them, they underestimated the complexity of the terrain and overestimated the reliability of short excursions near populated areas. Their plan did not involve deep jungle penetration. Accounts indicate they intended a brief hike near an accessible area, close enough to return within the same day. They carried limited supplies, appropriate for a short outing rather than prolonged isolation. There was no expectation of danger. Weather conditions at the time were typical for the region, warm, humid, with intermittent rain. Visibility within the forest was limited, but not unusual. David and Crystal had some general outdoor experience. They were physically capable and accustomed to walking trails. However, they lacked specialized knowledge of Amazonian navigation, plant identification, or emergency signaling in dense jungle environments. Like many travelers, they relied on a mental map of where they believed they were relative to known landmarks. This mental map would later prove unreliable. The initial portion of their hike progressed without incident. The forest was quiet in the way it often is during daylight hours, with distant insect noise and occasional bird calls. The trail they followed was narrow but visible. Over time, subtle deviations appeared. The ground became softer. Vegetation closed in. The path narrowed further until it no longer resembled a defined route. At some point, the distinction between trail and forest floor blurred. The decision that followed was not dramatic. There was no sudden storm or injury. Instead, there was a small navigational choice made under the assumption that the correct route lay just ahead. This assumption was based on familiarity with other hiking environments, where trails often reappear after short interruptions. In the Amazon, this logic does not hold. Paths vanish permanently. The forest does not preserve passage. When David and Crystal realized the trail was no longer visible, they attempted to retrace their steps. The forest offered no clear confirmation that they were moving back toward their entry point. After several attempts, it became evident that the terrain looked the same in all directions. The canopy filtered sunlight evenly, erasing shadows that might indicate orientation. There were no distinctive trees or rock formations to reference. By the time they acknowledged they were lost, daylight had already begun to fade. This marked the point at which their situation shifted from inconvenience to isolation. The decision to stop moving and conserve energy was not immediate. Instead, they continued to search for familiar ground, gradually increasing their physical and mental fatigue. Nightfall in the Amazon is abrupt. Light disappears quickly once the sun drops below the canopy line. Temperatures remain warm, but humidity increases. Insects become more active. Without shelter or tools, the environment becomes difficult to tolerate for extended periods. David and Crystal had no means to build a fire. They had no reliable way to signal their location. Their supplies were limited to what they had carried casually. Their first night was spent exposed to the forest floor. Accounts suggest they attempted to remain close together, minimizing movement to avoid injury. Sleep was minimal. Sounds unfamiliar to them carried through the darkness, amplified by uncertainty rather than immediate threat. The forest continued its routine uninterrupted. At dawn, visibility improved, but orientation did not. They made a deliberate decision to search for water, recognizing dehydration as a primary risk. In tropical environments, water is abundant but not always safe to consume. Streams and puddles can carry parasites and bacteria unfamiliar to travelers. Despite this risk, the need for hydration outweighed concerns about illness. They located a small water source and drank cautiously. This provided temporary relief but did not solve their larger problem. Without knowledge of nearby rivers or settlements, movement became a calculated risk. Walking blindly could increase distance from potential rescue routes. Over the next several days, their routine became simplified. They moved during daylight, rested when exhaustion set in, and sought water whenever possible. Food was scarce. They had no reliable way to identify edible plants or insects without risking poisoning. As a result, they consumed little. Hunger became secondary to thirst and fatigue. Physical condition deteriorated gradually. Energy levels dropped. Minor scratches and insect bites accumulated, increasing discomfort but not immediately threatening. Mental strain grew more significant. Decision-making slowed. Conversations became shorter and more functional, focused on immediate needs rather than long-term planning. At some point during the second or third day, they attempted to follow what they believed was a natural drainage route, hoping it would lead to a larger river. This strategy is often recommended in survival situations, but only when terrain allows consistent downstream travel. In dense jungle, waterways can loop, split, or disappear underground. Progress was uneven. Obstacles forced frequent detours. As days passed, the forest showed no indication of human presence. No distant engine noise. No cut vegetation. No clearings. The realization that they were not near a commonly traveled area added psychological weight. Time became difficult to track accurately. Without a watch or consistent sunlight cues, days blurred together. By the fourth day, dehydration symptoms intensified. Movement slowed noticeably. They conserved energy by limiting unnecessary walking. Shelter remained minimal, consisting of natural cover beneath foliage. Rain provided temporary relief from thirst but increased exposure to cold stress at night. Despite these conditions, they continued to make deliberate decisions rather than panicking. They avoided reckless movement. They stayed together. These choices likely contributed to their survival. The absence of severe injury was also significant. In environments like the Amazon, a single misstep can escalate quickly into a life-threatening situation. Search efforts began without their knowledge. Once authorities were alerted to their absence, local search teams initiated standard procedures. These involved ground searches along known access points and river routes. The scale of the forest limited the speed and reach of these efforts. Visibility from above was minimal. On the sixth day, David and Crystal encountered signs of human activity. Reports indicate they came upon a trail or cleared area that suggested proximity to a settlement or travel route. This discovery marked a shift in their situation, though they did not immediately encounter people. Eventually, they were located by searchers. The exact circumstances of first contact vary slightly between reports, but confirmation of their survival followed shortly after. They were dehydrated, weakened, and in need of medical evaluation, but alive. Extraction proceeded without incident. Recovery took place under medical supervision. Both individuals required rehydration and monitoring but did not sustain long-term physical injury. The experience left psychological effects consistent with extended isolation and stress, though public accounts do not detail these extensively. Their story entered public awareness through media coverage focused on the risks of jungle travel and the importance of preparation. It served as a reminder rather than a spectacle. There were no heroic feats, no dramatic rescues. The outcome hinged on restraint, endurance, and the absence of compounding mistakes. 6 days in the Amazon did not transform David and Crystal into symbols of conquest or triumph. Instead, their experience illustrated the narrow margin between routine exploration and prolonged survival. The forest did not change. It remained as it was before and after their presence. Such incidents are not rare in remote environments. What distinguishes them is not the danger itself, but the way small decisions accumulate over time. In this case, survival depended less on action than on limitation. Moving less. Consuming cautiously. Staying together. Waiting. The Amazon continues to exist beyond individual stories. It absorbs mistakes without acknowledgement. Those who enter it briefly may leave with lasting understanding, while the forest itself remains unchanged, continuing its slow, uninterrupted processes. Their 6 days passed quietly, without witnesses. The forest did not record their fear or relief. It offered no judgment. When they were removed from it, the vegetation closed behind them, erasing the trace of their presence almost immediately.